Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on what time you're watching this. Welcome to Existential Sunday. My name is Corey, and if we have not met before, hi. I'm a husband, I'm a father, podcaster, writer, and a speaker. And this is Existential Sunday. If this is your first time, whether you're watching the replay or you're watching this live, this is a space that we hold on Sundays for folks to allow themselves the freedom to sit in their deconstruction and in their decolonization of their faith or their worldview. This is a space where we leave room for questions. We leave room for, I don't know. we make space for us being human. This is a space where I guess if I were to sum it up before I get into today's couple of things I want to say, I'd sum it up by saying it's a space where it's okay to be human. It's just not okay to be harmful to others in our quest to understand some of the greater meanings of the world around us. How's that for an intro? If you'd like to share this, you never have to ask. So if you're watching this later on the replay and you want to share it, you can share it now. If you want to wait to the end, you can share it. If you are watching live and you just want to share it immediately because you trust me, you can also share that right now. No one ever has to ask me. Okay, now that's all out of the way. I have so much that I want to process, but I want to process it after first acknowledging that in the wake of the Breonna Taylor ruling, where 3 officers were charged with or were brought to trial over her murder, which we'll get into some of the details a little bit later on. One was charged with wanton endangerment. So I don't know anybody from the family. I'm not a part of the family, but I can only imagine that seeing your daughter's name, your niece's name, your cousin's name, your friend's name come up again in the media the way that it is has to be painful. It has to be painful to, as someone connected to Breonna Taylor, if you're a part of her family or you're one of her friends or whatever the case might be, one of her coworkers. She was an essential worker, putting herself at risk to care for people before she was murdered in her own home, unarmed. There has to be some more pain, almost like a more grieving of her again, fresh almost, a brand new grieving process. And I think for all of us on the peripheral of her inner circle, we are feeling that grief again. We are again walking through a process of anger and denial and bargaining and depression. We are experiencing all those things again as we have witnessed that a Black body is less valuable than drywall in the eyes of America. And we are dealing with that grief. So before I begin to talk about some of the why and how, I want us to pause for a moment to collectively, as you're watching this and I'm sitting here in this moment, that we breathe in the grief. We let ourselves feel angry or sad or depressed or a sense of, I can't believe this is happening again or has happened. Whatever that thing is, I think that I want to give you the space and allow you the permission. Like I can't grant you the permission other than to say, to validate that thing you're feeling is normal, is human, is okay. Even if you're not related to her, we all felt this heaviness. Even if you never met Breonna Taylor, which is most of us watching this, you still felt and still do right now feel grief, especially for my Black sisters out there. For any Black woman who's watching this, for any Black mother who has Black daughters, or any Black daughters out there, that Black women that are especially feeling how hard it is just to be a Black woman in America, on top of feeling the grief of a Black woman whose life was devalued the way Breonna Taylor's life has been devalued postpartum. I know there's a lot of grief in that. And I want to acknowledge that. I want to acknowledge that there is a sadness, there is a heaviness. If you struggled this week to get work done, it's because there was this heaviness that you felt as a Black woman. I'm sure of it. And my heart goes out to you. My thoughts and my prayers is all I have to offer. And I hope that is enough in this moment. And it probably isn't, but I just want to make space for that. I don't want to be so quick to run to talk about the things that outrage me. And I will talk about some of the things that outrage me today, but I don't want to be so quick to jump to that we don't allow ourselves the full range of our human experience and our human emotions. And this week, I think we've all felt a range, and that's okay. I want to talk about this idea that's sort of been floating around in my head this week about our perceptions, about our what we do once we found out what happened, and then we start to move into how and why it happened. That's kind of our human nature, right? That we see a thing that has happened, and then what we do is we actually grab a narrative out of the what to construct a why, so that we can sort of live and be at peace with it. Like whenever we hear about a school shooting, a mass shooting, or something terrible that's happened, we do want to know why. And I'll just speak for myself. Sometimes I want to know why, so that I can feel a sense of safety, right? That I don't want to believe it's random. Like, because if it's random, if it's just like, it just happened, which oftentimes is the case. But if in my mind, it just happened, if there wasn't some narrative to it that I can attach to make sense of it, then I feel more fear. And we as human beings, in fact, the one of the writers of the Christian Testament of the Bible says that we see through a glass darkly, like we don't have the entire picture, which is really interesting, because even the way that our eyes work is that our eyes don't actually see everything. Our eyes, in some sort of tandem with our brains, begin to form perceptions almost reflexively, like building the data off of things that we already know or understand about things. So if I look outside and I see a tree, my brain begins to construct the rest of it. My eyes don't actually even see the entire tree. My brain tells me what I'm seeing. It's an interesting idea about us as human beings. Like our brains are always trying to be efficient. So our brains are consistently taking previous data, old data, and building the picture that's in front of us. And that's what we refer to in the DEI world as implicit bias. Our brains are seeing a thing and going, okay, or seeing a person, seeing a human being and going, constructing what we know about them. And then what, as we've talked about before on many of the podcasts and on this Existential Sunday, that becomes very dangerous when you're talking about like someone who has a firearm. And my brain starts to build a construct about a Black man in a hoodie and goes, oh no, I should kill him. That's a threat to me. But that's a conversation for another day. Our brains, our ways that we process the what, when we start putting the why and how on top of what happened, we start to select narratives out of that. All of us as human beings do that. Every last one of us does that. That's not reserved for one race or another. That is us as human beings. We do that. And in this Breonna Taylor situation, I have watched people choose a narrative that I believe is so toxic, so painful. And I want to get to it. I'll probably get to it in a moment. And at this point, I can feel so much stuff in my head that like I'm praying I get to back to that. But I'm seeing this narrative develop about Breonna Taylor's relationships. And there are people in the world right now who are trying to in their how and why build a narrative that ultimately lands at the police were justified to do what they did. So here's the story. Breonna Taylor and her boyfriend are asleep or in bed. I've heard asleep, I've heard in bed. Either way, they are in bed when all of a sudden there is a loud noise and someone coming through the door of their apartment. Back up a moment. These are police barging into the doors of their apartment, but they don't know these are police. They just, they don't know that. The police know that they're police, but they don't know that these are police barging into the door. The police sought out a warrant, a no-knock warrant, which is supposed, from what I understand, what I read this week, was supposed to be issued based on a threat of violence. Well, a no-knock warrant so that you can surprise violent criminals. As the story goes, there was a belief that there were drugs being trafficked through Breonna Taylor's apartment. And so these police, operating on a no-knock warrant, barge into this apartment, Breonna Taylor's boyfriend, believing that it was Breonna's ex-boyfriend, who was a drug dealer, is whatever. He fires shots and he shoots one of the officers, and they begin to fire back, striking Breonna Taylor and killing her. So from that, what happened, people have started to go, why and how? Well, it's happened because Breonna Taylor had too much proximity to drugs and violence. Because Breonna's boyfriend shot first at the police officers. Therefore, we feel like it's justified that that happened. Meanwhile, not too far from Louisville, Kentucky, up north of there, probably about 7 hours, I've made this drive a couple times, is Kenosha, Wisconsin, and a neighboring town in Illinois, where Kyle Rittenhouse is from. If you don't know who Kyle Rittenhouse is the 17-year-old who went to a Black Lives Matter demonstration and with an assault rifle at 17 years old and wound up killing 2 people. Meanwhile, the narrative that is being constructed from his by some of the same people who are constructing a narrative about what happened to Breonna Taylor, the narrative being constructed about Kyle Rittenhouse is that he was a kid and a patriot who was simply trying to protect, watch this, his community. Mind you, he came over from Illinois to Wisconsin. That's not your community, bro. But this story, and I was talking about Kyle Rittenhouse earlier this week. In fact, I didn't even know when I was talking about Kyle Rittenhouse that the verdict for Breonna Taylor's killers had just come out while I was talking about Kyle Rittenhouse, because I saw him trending on Twitter. Someone who I didn't know in the comments on the Facebook version, or the Facebook video, came into the comments, and he said he started wanting to argue with me, and he said that my facts were wrong and that there's a video that proves that Kyle Rittenhouse was acting in self-defense and that he was carrying a legal firearm. So I watched the video because I'm thinking to myself, maybe I don't know, maybe there's some part of this I don't know, maybe this guy's a lawyer, maybe whatever. And I watched a video. Now, let me be very clear. I didn't sit and watch a 25-minute video. When I scrolled to the end and realized that this video was propaganda of someone who had seen the video that proves that Kyle Rittenhouse was acting in self-defense. This was a person talking about a video that he never showed. So I had to go find the video somewhere else. And when I go and find this video about Kyle Rittenhouse defending himself, it is like a documentary that begins by telling the story of who Kyle Rittenhouse is as a person, and then moving on to some grainy footage to communicate that he was acting in self-defense. At no point in the video do you ever see very clear evidence with your eyes right in front of you that Kyle Rittenhouse was ever acting in self-defense. That never do you see this in the video. But however, like I told you earlier, when your eyes and your brain begin to act in tandem with one another, you start to see what you've always seen. And for too many people in America, when it comes down to seeing Black folks and white folks, you have a narrative about Black people that is already here. So as soon as your eyes perceive something, or your ears hear something, or Tucker Carlson or any of the other jackasses over at Fox News begin to say things out loud, that your brain begins to go, oh yeah, let's build this narrative. Yeah. Let's build this. Breonna Taylor, she was associated with thugs and gangbangers, and that's what happens when you associate people like that. It may be sad, and we're sad that she lost her life, and maybe she was trying to turn her life around, but she still was in that situation. That is the narrative that you construct. But for Kyle Rittenhouse, who has an assault rifle at 17, you don't have that same narrative in the back of your head. In the back of your head, for the white boy, you have in your mind that he must naturally be a good kid, right? This is why mass shooters who are white get brought in. Though they're armed with assault rifles, they are more often than not, they're brought in unharmed. Meanwhile, unarmed Black men and women all across this nation are shot down in the streets, because the narrative at work, the way the brain and the eyes and the perceptions of Black and white folks are working for some folks in this country, it is continually saying that when I see Black, I see crime. And when I see crime, I see Black. Because you and I both know, if we're being intellectually honest, that if Kyle Rittenhouse were a young Black man, he would not have made it 5 feet with an assault rifle. Let's just flip this, and let me present this to you. Let's flip this whole thing again, right? Kyle Rittenhouse is a Black guy. We'll leave his name the same. All will change. We won't change his outfit. We won't change his outlook. We'll simply change his name. We'll simply change his ethnicity, what he looks like. He's Black and his hair is like mine, and he has an assault rifle at a Trump rally. Like people who are rallying for Trump. Like not far from here, there was a Truckers for Trump rally. Let's say that I showed up and my name is Kyle Rittenhouse with an assault rifle at a Truckers for Trump rally, and see how that goes for me with law enforcement. So because of the fact that we all have this, right? We all have this perception, which is never singular. It's never just, I see the facts, because so many people try to act as though what they see, they have objective truth. They're just being objective. I'm just going off of what happened in the story. You're actually not. What you're going off of is all of the information that your brain has put away, and that you allowed your brain to continue to put away without stopping it. This is where another thing that the New Testament writer Paul was talking about when he said, we take captive every thought. Part of taking captive every thought for us in our context here in 2020 in the United States is when I have a thought that comes to me that's a natural reflexive thought about someone other than me. If I don't know their story and my brain's trying to create a construct, I have to physically capture that thought and say, wait a minute, hold on. I don't know this person. I don't know who they are. I don't know if they're coming from church. I don't know anything about them. So I'm not going to, especially when we're talking about dominant culture, looking at Black and brown folks, if you continue to let your brain form the opinion, put together a perception, and feed that back to you, and then you act on that thing, that is textbook racism. If you continue to do that, though your brain is trying to be efficient, so there's grace for the fact that your brain, all of our brains are trying to be efficient and trying to keep us alive and trying to keep our heads from exploding with a bunch of new information. That's the grace that I will grant you. But after listening to this and all the last, I don't know how many years of people saying to you that we all carry this implicit bias, and that implicit bias that is carried by the dominant culture towards Black and brown folks has detrimental, violent, life and death effects. Y'all got to start capturing your thoughts when it comes to how you perceive people. And you got to start capturing your thoughts when it comes to how you perceive the what of the instances that you see in front of you. And stop allowing anti-Black ideologies, no matter if it's she we don't speak of or the new he we don't speak of, whose name I'll say one time so you know who I'm talking about, David Harris Jr. Just because you find some Black folks, again, I'll say this again, who will continue to spout and spit out anti-Black ideas, it does not mean that those ideas are not inherently racist, and it does not mean that those ideas do not show up to collaborate with what you're already predisposed to think to cause you to do harm, whether it's rhetorically or physically, to Black and brown folks that you encounter. When I was talking earlier this week about Breonna Taylor, there were a couple of white men who showed up in the comments. I've developed a much lower tolerance for this kind of nonsense. So they will never see this because I blocked them, but they came into the comments, and one of them in particular encapsulated this whole thing that I'm talking about when he said, "I've only watched a couple minutes of your video," and I'm paraphrasing here, and in essence, I already know that you're wrong. That's it in a nutshell. I have this much of the what, but I already know the why and the how is off. How do you already know that? Because you've already come to the table with these preconceived notions and ideas about why that what exists, about why George Floyd was murdered. And notice the pattern, folks. Anytime there's a situation like this, be it Breonna Taylor, who was asleep in her bed before this all took place, be it Trayvon Martin, who was just buying some Skittles and walking through a neighborhood, be it George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, be it Botham Jean, who was in his own apartment minding his own business when he was shot and killed. In each one of these instances, what we find happening is a dominant culture. And usually, if I'm being honest, I'm going to be honest with you. Usually, where I find this coming from is conservative white folks. You start to find these constructs show up. They checked Botham Jean's house for drugs. The worship leader from Dallas, Texas, who was in his house eating a bowl of ice cream in his underwear and was shot and killed. They checked his house for drugs. And we see this happening so often that in each one of these instances, there is a narrative that dominant culture, conservative, white, a lot of times evangelicals start to try to build to reinforce the idea that that the person who was killed was an animal to begin with. So don't feel so bad for Breonna Taylor. We don't really have any issues in this country when it comes to race. Breonna Taylor's boyfriend fired first. So did Kyle Rittenhouse, twice. Out on the streets, not only not in his own home, but not even in his own state. Yet, because Breonna Taylor's boyfriend fired first, this is justified. While also Kyle Rittenhouse is justified to be outside in a state, in a town that's not his, and fire and shoot and kill two people. Folks, I want to bring this to a conclusion, a place where I give you something to think about, if I'm not already, but give you something to act on and to practice, right? Because there is another principle that I love from I think this is the Christian Testament or the Hebrew Testament. I don't know which testament in the Bible this comes from, but this idea that we should be slow to speak and quick to listen. So many people are quick to speak and slow to listen. And as a result, you continue to have the wrong people and things shape your perception of why things happen. Because you're not quick to listen, you're quick to speak. Your speaking is coming from the stuff that's already here, and the stuff that's already here. If we're all being honest, especially when it comes to people who I don't live around, grow up with, or know their experience, the stuff that's already here has come from places other than the source. It's like when we talk about hearing it from the horse's mouth. I don't even know what that means. We don't hear things about others from the horse's mouth. We hear from, like, I guess, the pig or the cow or the chickens. I don't know how far to take this analogy, but I think you know what I'm saying. We don't get the experience of the people over there. We just get the perceptions. And then when we start to talk about those people over there who we don't know, who we've not sat with, whose culture we've not dove into, then we start to just build our perceptions based off, as I said before, the stuff that confirms what our brains already want to believe. The only antidote to that is that we start allowing the people at ground zero for these experiences to tell their story. In fact, let's even go deeper than that. I've said this to you many times, and this is where I move into the ethic that I believe and the tradition that I come out of. The way that I understand the Christian tradition is that it is a tradition that says we want to hear from the people who don't normally get to write history, because history is normally written by those who won. We want to hear from the people who history has stepped on, has pushed to the side, has tried to marginalize, but somehow their collective strength and their collective resolve keeps showing up generation after generation after generation. We want to hear from the descendants of slaves, because those people should not have the kind of resolve that they have based on the way the world, and certainly the United States, has treated them. They keep showing up with a strength. Black women keep showing up with a resolve and a strength and a way and a dignity and a way of being and doing and speaking and moving throughout the world that we should be paying attention to, not interrupting them, not speaking for them, not trying to show up and prove by our data and what we have to say that we're right. We need to be listening. We need to be slow to speak and quick to listen to people in our society who have been oppressed, who have been pushed to the side, who we have said, you don't have anything of value to say. Let the white men talk. Let white property owning men make the decisions. Because you who don't own property, you who are not white, you who do not have a penis, you don't have anything to say of value. And the tradition that I believe deeply in my soul, that I come from, the way that tradition began and the purity of that tradition is to say we want to hear from the most marginalized people. Because with the most marginalized people, there is a divine presence that is with them, that animates them, that keeps them alive, that keeps them going, that gives them energy, that gives them life. And we want to hear what they have to say. So as we are all, as human beings, trying to understand the whys of the whats that happen around us, let's be people who listen to the voices of the marginalized to help shape our why, instead of always allowing ourselves to have all the answers constructed for us. Let's be quick to listen, slower to speak. But before I go, speaking of speaking, we all have an opportunity November 3rd to speak with our ballots, not just for who will be the next president of the United States, but also a lot of the propositions in each one of your states and your towns. There are a lot of tiny things, actually, a lot of things that may feel a lot smaller than voting for the president of the United States, that have a dramatic effect on how laws and communities are arranged to take care of the folks that need the most help. So make sure that you vote on November 3rd, but also make sure that before you vote November 3rd, that you sort of listen to maybe some of the words said today, like to think about, okay, who should our society be hearing from? What are their voices saying, and what do they need? And maybe we vote like that. I'm going to tell you who to vote for. I'm just going to tell you to vote. And I'm also going to say again, if you've not registered to vote, you can go check. I'll put the links in the comments so that you can go check to make sure you're registered to vote. But please make sure you get out there and do so. And if you are able and willing, I think there's still a need for poll workers. So you can do that also. All right, folks. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you to all of you who are part of the Patreon community. I so appreciate you. Thank you for your support of this work. And there was one other thing I wanted to say, and it just completely slipped my mind. Oh, well. If you've watched this for 30 minutes and 28 seconds, that to me suggests that perhaps this is something that you feel is inspiring and noteworthy, and something that you either want to share with your friends, either on Facebook, you can tag them in the comments, or from YouTube or even Instagram, you can just share this. Again, you never have to ask my permission. Grace and peace to all of you. Until next time.